The Rendlesham Directive. Hello, today we have a story about a mysterious phenomenon known as the Rendlesham Directive. Are you ready to dive into a world of strange lights, unexplainable signals, and secrets that have been hidden from the public for decades? Buckle up. This will be a journey that will make you question what you think is reality. This is part 1 of 3. The night air hung heavy over the Suffolk countryside, carrying with it the faint scent of damp earth and the distant hum of military installations. December 26, 1980, seemed like any other cold winter night, yet those who walked the perimeter of RAF Woodbridge would soon find that this night was anything but ordinary. The winds whispered through the trees as though trying to warn of the approaching anomaly, though no one could have predicted what was about to unfold. Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt, veteran of countless military operations, had been called in to investigate a series of reports that, on the surface, seemed improbable. Staff Sergeant Jim Peniston and Airman John Burroughs had described strange lights hovering above the forest, some appearing to descend and rest among the trees. Their initial reports were dismissed by some as hallucinations caused by stress or fatigue, but Halt felt a chill that suggested otherwise. Something here was not merely a trick of the mind. As the officers approached the wooded area near the base, their flashlights carved thin beams through the night. The forest seemed alive with a quiet tension. Shadows shifted where there should have been none. Every crunch of leaves underfoot resonated as if magnified, drawing their focus toward the clearing where the first witnesses claimed to have seen the lights. And then they appeared, or perhaps revealed themselves. Pale, geometric lights hovered silently between the trees, almost pulsing, as if breathing. There was no sound, yet the presence was overwhelming. Halt recorded his observations meticulously, aware that what they were encountering could redefine understanding of aerial phenomena. The object's movements defied conventional explanation, shifting angles too quickly for conventional aircraft, illuminating parts of the forest in unnatural patterns. Peniston, compelled by an unexplainable force, reached out, feeling the heat of an energy unlike anything he had experienced. His fingers brushed the air where light seemed almost tangible, as if reality itself had softened at the edges. Then came the subtle vibrations underfoot. At first barely perceptible, then stronger, resonating through their boots and bones alike. Halt's experience in the field told him that this was no ordinary encounter. The machinery of deception on the base had never produced such reactions. His mind raced, balancing military procedure against the surreal nature of the moment. They were in uncharted territory. The object, sensing perhaps their awareness, began to move slowly backward, retreating into the darkened thicket, yet leaving behind traces, circular impressions in the snow, a faint electric tingle that lingered in the air, and a sense of eyes watching from within the trees themselves. The men attempted to track it, calling for one another amidst the static of radios that intermittently cut in with bursts of interference. Their instruments, normally reliable, registered anomalies. Compass readings twisted unpredictably, temperatures plummeted locally around the object, and lights on electronic equipment flickered or died entirely. The scene suggested not just a visitation but a deliberate display of capability, as if the object were studying them, gauging their reactions, probing the limits of their comprehension. Hours passed, though time seemed irrelevant. The forest had transformed into a theater of the unknown. Every step, every rustle of wind, every distant animal cry heightened the tension. Halt and his team documented every detail, their pens and notebooks scribbling rapidly, each word an attempt to anchor reality in the face of the incomprehensible. Every flicker of light, every strange hum, every unexplained shadow was logged, a desperate effort to preserve evidence before it vanished as mysteriously as it had appeared. The object occasionally emitted a faint, almost imperceptible pulse of light. At first they thought it random, but as they observed, a pattern began to emerge. It was as if the craft was attempting to communicate in a language beyond words, a rhythm that resonated with a deeper part of the mind. Peniston felt a compulsion to respond, not through speech but through thought. Ideas, images, and sensations pressed upon him, a torrent of information that made his heart race and his skin prickle. Each pulse seemed to sync with the core of his consciousness, bending perception and reality alike. Then, abruptly, the lights intensified, revealing the shape in the darkness. Angular and metallic, yet not conforming to any known design, the craft hovered just above the treetops. Its surface shimmered with an iridescent glow, refracting the scant moonlight into spectral fragments that danced across the snow. The trees around it bent slightly, as if repelled by an invisible force. Halt could feel the weight of the presence pressing upon him, a mixture of awe, fear, and the undeniable understanding that whatever this was, it had intelligence and intent. A sudden sound, low and resonant, pulsed through the forest. Not a roar, not a vibration in the usual sense, but a tone that seemed to penetrate the mind itself. The officers froze. Radios crackled violently, flashlights flickered, and the air around them carried an electric charge that made hair stand on end. Burroughs whispered a single word, barely audible, "It's not from here," and in that moment every doubt evaporated. This was no terrestrial vehicle, no human experiment. Whatever they were witnessing belonged to a realm that defied earthly understanding. The team moved cautiously, compelled by both curiosity and protocol, documenting every motion. Halt spoke into his recorder, describing the lights, the structure, and the unearthly glow. His military training struggled to reconcile the scene before him with reality. The object's movements were deliberate, almost sentient. It shifted positions, sometimes retreating into shadows, sometimes revealing facets of its surface that seemed to shimmer with patterns too complex for human comprehension. Each revelation heightened the tension, a combination of wonder and fear that tightened their chests with invisible hands. Peniston, who had always been level-headed and methodical, found himself captivated, almost paralyzed by the energy emanating from the craft. As he reached out again, a surge of heat and light coursed over his skin, and images flashed in his mind, landscapes and symbols alien to human experience. He blinked rapidly, questioning whether these visions were real or hallucinations induced by exposure to the object. The sensation persisted, undeniable and immersive, leaving him with an unshakable sense that they were not alone, and that something was studying them, perhaps even learning from their presence. Halt signaled for calm, reminding his team to follow procedure, but even he felt the surreal nature of the encounter pressing against the boundaries of reason. The forest, normally a place of silent observation, now seemed alive with whispers, shadows, and movements just beyond the edge of vision. Every detail mattered. The indentation of snow beneath unseen weight, the faint scent of ozone in the air, the erratic fluctuations of their instruments, all clues to an intelligence that defied classification. Minutes stretched into hours, the night becoming a liminal space where human understanding was tested against forces unknown. They cataloged, photographed, and observed, aware that this evidence might never be understood, yet desperate to record it for those who might seek the truth. The object's final movements of the night were enigmatic. Slowly, deliberately, it ascended, vanishing into the darkness with a speed that defied physics, leaving behind only the cold night, the snow, and the lingering sense that the world had shifted in ways no one could yet articulate. The morning after the initial encounter did little to calm the unease that settled over RAF Woodbridge. Lieutenant Colonel Halt returned to the base headquarters, his mind racing with fragmented memories of lights, pulses, and shadows that seemed almost alive. Officers and airmen whispered in the hallways, some in disbelief, some with fear, others with an almost gleeful fascination, as though knowing something the world had yet to learn. Peniston and Burroughs recounted their experiences, their voices steady, but carrying the tremor of those who had touched something beyond comprehension. Despite the daylight, the forest itself seemed to linger in memory with a presence that refused to dissipate. Halt felt it in the hum of machinery, in the fleeting shadows cast by ordinary objects, and in the strange feeling of being watched. Reports came in from other personnel, lights over nearby fields, unexplained interference with communications, and fleeting glimpses of shapes darting beyond the tree line. Each account added layers of complexity, suggesting that what had visited was neither confined to a single night nor a single location. There was a pattern, subtle but undeniable, linking every sighting, every anomaly, into a narrative that human reasoning struggled to parse. Peniston, unable to shake the mental impressions from the encounter, returned to the site under the cover of darkness. Alone, he followed the faint impressions in the soil, the bent grass, and the frozen indentations left by the object. Each step seemed to draw him deeper into an intricate puzzle. As he moved, a low vibration filled the air, almost imperceptible at first, but growing steadily into a frequency that resonated in his chest and skull. He reached a clearing where the lights had hovered before, and there, etched into the frost, were patterns that no natural phenomenon could produce. Geometric and precise, they formed shapes that seemed to defy earthly logic, almost like a map or a language waiting to be deciphered. At the same time, Burroughs had his own experiences. He reported sensations, a pull in his mind, fleeting flashes of vivid imagery, and a strange warmth in the air. Objects around him seemed to shimmer with energy, as though the very molecules of the world were vibrating in resonance with something unseen. He stumbled back toward the base, shaken but determined to record every detail. Notes, sketches, and diagrams began to accumulate, forming a growing archive that told the story of events no one would have believed if it weren't corroborated by multiple witnesses. By evening, Halt convened a meeting with higher command. The implications of what had occurred were not only extraordinary but potentially destabilizing. Yet a directive was clear: secrecy. All records were to be controlled, reports sanitized, and witnesses instructed to speak cautiously. The tension between military protocol and the uncontainable strangeness of the phenomena created an atmosphere thick with paranoia and speculation. Officers found themselves weighing loyalty against conscience, wondering if the truth could ever be acknowledged without causing panic. That night the forest called them again. Lights returned, flickering at the edge of visibility, teasing the observers with glimpses of shapes that shifted and reformed. The craft, or whatever entity inhabited that space, seemed to be aware of their attempts to study it, reacting with movements that suggested intelligence and strategy. Radio signals went haywire, compasses spun in impossible directions, and the air itself hummed with an energy that penetrated the senses directly. It was no longer a matter of curiosity or caution. It was an encounter with a force that could neither be predicted nor controlled. Halt and his team followed protocol, documenting every anomaly, yet every observation only deepened the mystery. The lights formed patterns, rose and fell with almost deliberate rhythm, and created illusions of depth and motion that confounded human perception. Each pulse seemed imbued with intent, as if trying to communicate, but in a language alien to the senses. The officers felt it, a silent probing, assessing their reactions, and perhaps preparing them for something beyond human comprehension. By the early hours of the morning, the phenomena receded as suddenly as it had arrived. The forest lay still, the snow reflecting only the pale light of the moon. Yet the sense of presence lingered, etched into the memory of every observer. Peniston, Burroughs, and Halt knew that what had transpired was no fleeting hallucination or natural anomaly. Something had crossed the boundary between worlds, leaving behind signs that human understanding could not yet translate. The Rendlesham Directive, as it would come to be called in the restricted files, remained one of the most compelling and confounding UFO events in history. Witnesses continued to recount experiences with a mixture of awe and fear, each recalling the cold, precise energy of the object, its impossible movements, and the profound sense that the world was not as it seemed. For those who had touched the light, the forest had become a place of mystery, an arena where human comprehension collided with the unfathomable. As dawn approached, the officers retreated to the base, their minds alive with questions. Yet even as they walked away, the patterns remained, etched into snow, air, and memory alike. And somewhere beyond the trees, a presence watched, patient and calculating, as though the night had merely been the beginning of a much larger story, one that humanity was only beginning to witness.